I'm excited to welcome all of you to Hive Live session here. My name is Matthew Marzinski. I'm a product manager here at Microsoft, and I work with our global AV standards. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes to orient you to what we see here and to talk a little bit about what we're going to do, and then we'll get into it. So Microsoft has a very large portfolio of nearly 13,000 meeting rooms across the world. And to manage a portfolio that large, we've built a dedicated team here in Redmond in this facility. We are standing in a facility here that's off campus. It's in a large warehouse. It's about 20,000 square feet for the development and the evolution and the innovation around all of our meeting room technology. So within the frame of the camera that you're looking at me right now, you can see a couple of different tests going on. We've got some technology here behind us where we're comparing a couple of different screen technologies. We've got a Surface Hub over here. We work with what we call archetypes, room archetypes. So these are reference designs that we use to ultimately create the standards that get propagated all throughout the world in our conference rooms, so that we assure a consistent experience, not just for users, but also for all the technicians that need to install and ultimately maintain these rooms. So this is where all that happens. And even though this facility was built originally for our internal purposes, we make all of this available to customers. We have a lot of experience with these spaces, and we continue to innovate, especially in the context of hybrid work. And so that's why we've set up these sessions here to give a little bit of sneak peek into how Microsoft does it. So just to orient you a little bit to how this will go today, we're going to be doing sort of a speed dating exercise, going from room to room, and getting a view into that room, but also a view of that experience in those different types of rooms. I've got a couple of my colleagues here, and we're going to bring in a couple of people from the Teams PG to talk about what we're seeing on screen. The camera that you are looking at me through right now, that is actually not part of the room technology. That's a live streaming camera that we're bringing in. So we're going to go into each room, and you'll see the room from the point of view of if you walked in person. We'll talk about the room, and then we'll switch over to the in-room technology. So just to be clear, the mobile camera is not part of the experience. Well, welcome to our first room. This is one of our signature rooms, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. This is a medium signature room. Now, all the rooms in the Hive are built just like the way that we ship the rooms. This room and all the others are actually being installed throughout campus right now. We've even got customers that are installing these in their spaces. But at the Hive here, things look a little bit different than they would out in the field. So because this is a laboratory, and we've got an engineering team who uses and pokes and prods these rooms every day, we've got a lot of extra stuff here that's kind of not part of the room, but might be part of some other testing that's going on. So there's a monitor to my right here. You'll see cables throughout the floor. We've got, in this room in particular, we're doing some tests with audio, so we've got some extra loudspeakers. We'll talk through all that, but again, I just wanted to kind of orient you to what you're seeing here. So come on in, and I'm going to introduce my two colleagues, David Boyle and Sam Albert. They're going to talk about what we're seeing here, the technology, the experience, and then in a couple of minutes we'll actually turn the room on and see what it looks like through the room. Again, the camera that you're seeing right now, this is a camera that's just bringing you into the room as if you were here in person. It is not part of the room technology. So, Sam, I wonder if you could share a little bit about what makes this room special and how this compares.
Thanks, Matthew. Hi, everyone. So as Matthew mentioned, we are in our medium signature room. What a signature room means essentially is all of the components of this space. This is the software, the Teams experience, but also the furniture, the AV components. Everything is working together to create a very inclusive hybrid experience as part of your remote meetings. So you'll notice when you walk into the room, we've got our curved arched table. I guess even just taking a step back, a room like this, this is roughly about 14 feet wide by about 25 feet deep. Traditionally, you'd have a table down the middle with maybe about 10 or 12 in-room participants around a traditional rectangular table. By creating this signature experience, we've brought in this steel case table. This is a table that we designed with Steelcase here at the Hive. I think we have the first versions of these tables in cardboard strewn somewhere and someplace hanging as part of the relics. But we have about 7 or 8 people seated at our curved arched table. And then when we look at our design for our AV, we're leveraging the long wall, and that allows us to put this really large, ultra-wide display. So here we're powering this from an ultra-short throw projector that we have installed here on the floor, and this is about 138-inch diagonal. This is also one of our new screens that we have been working with one of our partners at Daylight. This is an ambient light rejecting screen, so this works really well even when you've got legacy lighting solutions. You know, our lights are not optimized for this space at all, but we're still getting a really bright, clear picture in this space. We've got a lot of windows here in this room as well. And that's one of the benefits we're seeing in some of the advancements in projection. Even in a room like this, we're still getting a really great, big, bright picture. Again, this is an ultra-wide display, so it works really well with front row. With front row enabled, I'll cue off of some of Matthew's notes earlier. We've got early builds. You'll notice a lot of duct tape on the floor. We're running a special early build of Teams. But you will notice some of our remote participants with their cameras turned on. At this position, they're seated really well so that when you're in room interacting, having conversations with remote participants, everyone, we're all at eye level. It's a very natural conversation. Everyone is facing the front display, so our camera here is also getting a great view of the in-room participants. It's at eye level. It's creating a very inclusive experience. So we've talked about our front display, we've talked about our projection, and then in a room like this, we're leveraging one of our early partners as well with Jabra. So this is the Jabra Panacast 50, the P50 camera. This is our camera. It's got a 180-degree field of view, so it captures the entire table. It's super close to the participants, but again, because of that wide field of view, everyone's in frame. It also has mic array and speakers all built in. So this is our all-in-one bar that we're leveraging for a room like this. I'll call out, we do have a few speakers on stands. We've got our amps and DSPs in the room as well. That's for some upcoming feature testing that we're doing around spatial audio, and we're really excited about that feature. Spatial audio in a room like this, I think, is a great experience in terms of remote participants from the left. If they're talking, it'll feel as if the voices are coming from that side of the screen. Same thing on the right. Until we've deployed that, again, we're deploying these rooms with these all-in-one bars, and this is still providing a great experience. Actually, Matthew had called out the camera that you're seeing us now is our roving camera, but you are getting picked up our audio from the mics on the bar. And when we do this switch over, it'll be a full experience. So those are the components for this room. My last comment before I hand it off to David is this is our reference specs to a signature room. This is one of the first rooms that we built as part of our signature experience in partnership with our facilities team here at Microsoft, with the Teams product group, to light up this experience. We've also seen a lot of great iterations of designs like this. Inclusive, our signature experiences really means hybrid, inclusive experience from the room, whether you're using projection or panels on the front room. There are a number of different AV bars that we would use that would fit and work well in a space like this. These are the archetypes that we are deploying at Microsoft that work really well for our room size and types and the technology. This is a good cue. I'll hand it off to David to talk a little bit about why we made some of the decisions around this implementation and this design and how we would deploy a room like this on campus.
Thank you, Sam. So we really took the approach to minimize the cost impact for the construction or the technology of this room. So as noted, the camera is off of the wall. We have it centrally located on a stand built by an OEM partner, Heckler, which allows us to place the projector in the ideal position for this ultra short throw projector. We can consolidate the technology solution to really the components that are in the stand. So we can mount the camera directly above the projector. We have then equipment storage just below the projector for the PC. Some other components that we took on this design is that the projector itself is made by Epson. We partnered with Epson to help eliminate some of the AV components that a room with projection would typically have, like control and EDID, some other aspects that this technology typically would need. But this projector has a built-in support for 21.9 which is the native resolution for this room. And it also has features that you would see in a monitor, such as Wake on Sync. So we don't have as many components as you would typically have for a room of this type. We just have a HDMI cable going from the MTR straight to the projector. We have simple USB cabling going to our Jabra bar, which provides the microphone, speaker, and camera. And then to power that, we have data and power underneath that stand. Out of there to the other components in the room. So room control, we use a Cat5 PoE source for the control system on the table that gives us content capture at the table. But again, minimizing that wiring. And the same concept for our collaboration camera. So that's a Logi Scribe, and it gives us simple installation through a Cat5 as well, and it captures the content on the whiteboard.
I want to talk a little bit about how this room fits into the context of an overall portfolio. But actually, before I do that, I just want to circle back to something that I heard you guys say. David and Sam, you both mentioned a handful of OEMs. I think we talked about Epson, we talked about Daylight, we talked about Logi, and I may be missing another one. But it sort of underscores part of the thing that gets me excited about working here, which is all of the partnerships we have with the OEMs that allow us to do all this stuff. That example of Epson actually tweaking their design to help eliminate a component is part of the value engineering story that we do here. And what that reminds me about is, I mentioned it in the intro, I mentioned creating a good user experience, not just for the actual users of the room, but for everybody who has to install and maintain and, you know, the entire value chain of people who touch this room. That's really it at our scale. That's really important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this room is not a replacement for a room this size, right? Sam, you mentioned this is a 14 by 25, but this is one of several different classes of archetypes that we have. This is our signature room. When would be a good time to use this design in a space as opposed to a more traditional layout?
So you mentioned, Matthew, absolutely right. We are not at Microsoft ripping out all of our existing traditional rooms to deploy and build spaces like this. This is part of our portfolio. I think in our new campus construction and as part of our portfolio planning, we're targeting roughly having about one of these per floor per every 2 floors in a workplace. We also work closely with a lot of the teams as they're designing spaces, whether it's this type of signature room or one of the other signature, there are small signature that we'll see shortly. It's really also a conversation of how does the team work? These types of rooms work really well when you're coming in, you're expecting a lot of hybrid work. You are a dispersed team. Maybe part of your team is in one location and you have discussions where you're meeting a few other of your teammates. If it was just the 3 of us or 4 or 5 of us having an in-person meeting, maybe we're dedicating a session to a brainstorming session, or it's just going to be mostly us in person. This might not be the room that would be your first choice when you're planning your scheduling your meeting. So, you know, we have showcases. These are rooms that we have built for our employees. We have had executives on campus who have requested this type of room layout for their space. It works well with the way that they work. Also, as part of our MTCs, these also create great showcase spaces as well for you to come in and experience all of the great features that are being built from teams and just really get a sense of what an ultimate hybrid meeting can be. What is that potential? And that resonates really well when you get to experience this in person.
Well, speaking of experiencing it in person, let's cut over. So we're going to say goodbye to our camera that's following us around here, but I just want the audience just to get a view of how we're sitting in the room. I'm sitting probably 1.5 arm lengths away from David, and then David is about 2 or 3 arm lengths away from Sam. So that's how we're oriented in the room. We're going to turn on the room AV in just a moment, and then you'll see how the room transmits us. We'll probably move around a little bit during the meeting because that's what people do, and you'll get a sense. But I just wanted, before we say goodbye to the camera, because we're not going to be able to see the interior of the room quite as much anymore, I just wanted to orient all of you, and let's cut over, and then we'll take some Q&A.
So Jabra was one of our first partners who had developed some of the IntelliFrame features that we're seeing now. So as part of the preview, we are 3 people in the room. So Jabra will typically go up to a 4-person grid in the camera feed. So it's framing us all very well now. Depending on how many people are in the room, you might get up to 4 grids. Sometimes they'll do a view like this where it's just 3 because we don't need that extra 4th grid. That's great. But it's also doing optimizations. Like they've introduced this feature. It's been probably over about a year now, and the optimizations that we're seeing, where if you've got more than 4 people in the room, they're trying to group people who are sitting close together.
Right, so David and I are gonna sit close together here. So if we were a fully packed table, there you go, and it snaps together.
So it snaps together.
Now we've got 3 people occupying only 2 frames, which leaves you 2 more frames for up to 4 more people.
That's right. And this is a feature that Jabra's team, all of that compute is happening on the edge, is happening on the device. We're seeing Logitech, we're seeing Poly introduce their implementations of these IntelliFrame features. That's exciting. Microsoft also has the IntelliFrame, the cloud version. So if you have a dumb camera in your room, something a little bit more legacy, you can still now get some of these features that really create a great hybrid lift for the experience for remote participants.
One of the neat things about this room in particular is that this room was designed at the Hive. And so the UI that's on the screen and the proportions and the resolution and all of that was actually designed in a physical space like this. When the team's UX team was laying out the screen, they didn't just do it on a computer in front of themselves. They did it from a distance. We built a room like this essentially out of cardboard. We didn't have the table at the time, and we didn't have a lot of the components. But we had the design and engineering team in here working on it in real time from the correct distance, so that things like resolution, readability, proportion, color, all of that were being designed for a physical space. And this idea of actually designing in the environment, my nickname for that is phygital design, right? All of this is a digital experience that's delivered in a physical space. And so it's really valuable to have this lab to be able to do such a thing. So as I'm sitting here, probably, I don't know, how far am I from the screen? Probably 10 feet, 15 feet from the screen.
Yeah.
Right here. I get, with my glasses, I have perfect vision, but I get really good readability in all the seats. One of the advantages of having the room turned 90 degrees is that you have everybody relatively closer. It's a radial arrangement to the screen, as opposed to a traditional room where you're down the length of the table, and so the person sitting at the far end of the table is not going to have as good a view. And guess what? In a lot of meetings, in business meetings, often the person that's the most important one in the room is the one that's sitting furthest away from the screen and the camera. And so this turns that issue literally on its side.
I will call out, Matthew. I agree. I think that the text now it's a great size, whether in this room or a more traditional space. That is relatively new. That's a lot of feedback that the Teams product group took in previous iterations. I believe it's probably been two months now that's been deployed, where they've upped the font size. And I saw Brian responded in the chat as well. There are different components of front row layout that are configurable in terms of size, right? You can make your gallery size. There are small, medium, large sizes on your gallery. Font size is not something yet that is configurable, but as Brian mentioned, I believe that is on the backlog as well.
Yep.
But the current text size, I think, is a very comfortable size. Just personally, I was a huge fan of the latest update.
And I mean, the front row layout is nice. I mean, we're looking at, center of screen content, great size, and just off to the side is the text. So you really aren't missing anything. You don't have to, there's not a lot of effort into seeing the conversation pop up and glance at it real quick and still be engaged in the content.
I'm just gonna get up and move over here and sit between Sam and David now. See, the camera is tracking me. I happen to be talking, so it's tracking me as I'm talking. But now I've moved positions in the room. I got David to my left and Sam to my right. I'm located about midway between them, but you can see that the camera has actually reframed, putting us each in our own gallery.
Did we want to show content capture?
Actually, that's a great idea. Yeah. So in the room here, we've got a Logi Scribe. And we didn't clean the whiteboard before we started. Probably done that. But if I'll kind of go in reverse here. Instead of adding content, I'll remove content. You can see what's happening here is as I'm erasing the board, it's erasing, but you don't see my hand. So this technology takes out the person here, and it just focuses on content. So I will add a little bit of content.
We are technically in range of the P50's capability of picking up whiteboard per their specs in this room size. I believe the range is officially supported at around 12 feet. That said, the call out would be currently when you are in a teleframe feature in the Jabra, it will not also do whiteboard capture. You need to be in the active speaker or group framing. We very much like the IntelliFrame experience. That is feedback that we have pushed to Jabra. We'd appreciate it. A lot of the panels now are configurable. So there are different layout options. That's right. Previously, chat was only available in front row. Today, in gallery view, content view, you can enable the chat window. You can flip, hand raise, and chat. You can remove panels. So if you just want just chat and remove hand raise completely, all of those are panels that are configurable, and then also can be set as default through the XML settings of the MTR. So when you do your one-click join, if you have a particular room, you can have your preferred view or layout for that room as the default as well.
We use the Panacast 50, the same camera that's in this room, same front of room bar, in our focus rooms, which are about 10 feet by 10 feet. And that's typically a 3 to 5 person capacity. That's a much easier space in which to accommodate the built-in whiteboard capture. And there, because it's such a small room and you have relatively few people, you can keep it in panorama mode because there's not a huge advantage in putting people into a gallery since they're sitting right next to each other anyway. And it's a relatively low cost room. And so the value of saving the cost of an additional camera in that room is really much higher than in a relatively more expensive room like this one.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Brian. I am a principal technical program manager here in our customer engineering group. I focus on events. I focus on rooms. I'm going to take you through a quick level set of the wonderful world of Teams rooms, just to make sure that we're all on the same page as to what Teams rooms are all about. And if you think about it, really one of the core components that we're starting to see now in the advent of meetings in general is this idea of hybrid work, right? Hybrid is here to stay, not going to go anywhere anytime soon. As you can see, our folks are transporting themselves from room to room, but I'm actually not physically up there with the rest of the team. So even this presentation that we're doing here today is formulated through hybrid. And the world of hybrid work is critically important for us. And when we look at the world of rooms and how that's going to fit in, we have to look at all of the various aspects of how hybrid is really designed to give us that flexibility. And really what we think about in these areas of hybrid are 4 key pillars, if you will, or 4 key areas: inclusivity, ease of use, flexibility, and security. So let's kind of dig into each of those as we go. Inclusivity, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer in the sense that we want to make sure that when we're running an event, we are as inclusive as possible. And that's not just inclusive to the folks that are in the room, it's also inclusive for the folks that are not in the room. How do they get a voice to be able to represent themselves? Likewise, for the folks that are in the room, if there's 20 people in the room, how do we get 20 individual voices out of that room as opposed to one singular tiny dot, right? So we want to have inclusivity. Rooms are built to be able to drive inclusivity, as you saw in the last demo, and you'll see again as we get into a couple of the next rooms. Ease of use. We want to make sure that as we're looking at room deployments, it's simple. It's one-touch join. It's a consistent type experience as you move from room to room. So as you're looking at rooms that are using different layouts, different hardware, what have you, the experience is generally still the same. We want it to be that level of ease of use. But we also want flexibility because we know that not all rooms are built the same. Some rooms are built in such a way that the little half moon layout that you saw in the last example is ideal for that type of situation. But you might see another room where it's not really designed for that. Maybe it's a smaller type room. Maybe it's a much larger room. So we want it to be flexible, and that's where our archetypes kind of come in so that we can understand how to adapt the room for the physical layout that we have. And then, of course, at the end of the day, security is always top of mind. The devices need to be kept secure, be able to kept up to date with more capabilities from a management perspective, from a feature perspective. So again, being able to have automation to deploy the updates that we need and make sure that the room systems themselves are as secure as possible based on what we do already in the Teams ecosystem. So with that in mind, and we start looking at these various room types, what we would call archetypes, we think about driving hybrid experiences based on the type of locations that you have. And as you can see on the slide here, we've got a few examples for you. Your typical small, medium, large type layouts that will accommodate a wide array of various devices, whether they're certified audio and video devices that are separate, whether they're singular units. We'll get into that in just a second, right? But being able to accommodate the type of gear for the type of room is critically important, right? I don't want to be sitting in a very small room and then try to cram two displays on the screen that may not make sense, and I'll end up sitting, like a foot away from it. That's not going to work. But in a much larger room, it might make sense for me to have a multiple display and then different display sizes and so forth. As we get into the upper room types, like the larger rooms, the executive boardrooms, we might want to have integration with various AV components, integration with the lighting. If it's a divisible room, integration into that type of layout, right? So as you can see, we want to build an ecosystem that will allow these devices to seamlessly fit into any type room, any size room, any layout room. We do have room systems that are built on both the Windows and the Android platform. And as you'll see, as we talk more about these archetypes, you'll get an idea of how these various components can fit in to the overall story. When we talk about the devices themselves, we have modularity and we have integrated, right? Modularity gives us the utmost flexibility because you're able to pick and choose the certified components that you want to use. Certified camera types, certified microphones, and so forth. You can really customize that to the room. And modularity gives you that added benefit of being able to update and upgrade various components as you see fit. That might make perfect sense, again, for a larger room, an executive room, or something of that nature. But if you're in a small huddle room, you might not be looking to swap out these components on a very regular basis. So that's where integrated comes into play. The integrated devices are combined audio video units into a singular package. That gives you very easy deployment, great manageability. The sacrifice there is you can't just upgrade, say, the camera or just the microphone. You have to upgrade the entire device. But again, for the room type that you're looking to put this in, may not necessarily be that big of a deal anyway. When we look at the last item, we talk about not only being able to have your standard meet and present scenarios, but your meet, present, and co-create scenarios. So being able to have digital whiteboard. But let's take that into the next level and look at leveraging digital whiteboard capabilities with Surface Hubs, Surface Hub devices. Now we get digital representations of that available into the Microsoft Whiteboard app, and it's much more flexible for me to do all of the post-event type things that I want to do without having to whip out my cell phone and take a picture of the analog or the physical whiteboard that happens to be in the room. So a lot of flexibility that we have in the world of rooms, in the world of devices, and as you'll see in the coming segments, you're going to get a chance to see even more types of layouts that we can do and various different types of devices that we have to support that.
So the room that we started in a little while ago, again, that was a signature room. And what that means is that it's optimized for hybrid meetings. And those are the types of rooms that you might want to put in places where you have teams that tend to work in dispersed locations, or they're executive facing or customer facing, where a real sense of hybrid meeting presence dialed up about as high as you can get it is important. This type of room that we're in right now, this is a very important room. This is about 12 by 18 feet, and we call this a small. We have close to 6,000 rooms like this. And this is where a lot of work gets done, not just at Microsoft, but at a lot of companies. And so in rooms like this, we want to approach the way that we build these very carefully and be thoughtful about where we're putting in traditional arrangements, traditional layouts versus signature layouts. We're actually going to look at both. We're going to look at the same size room, small, in a traditional layout and in a signature layout. So we're going to start with the traditional here. So I'm going to welcome you in here. We've got Sam and David again. We've got a table in the middle here. This should feel very familiar to a lot of people. For 6 people, 7 actually, if you count the person at the end. And so this works great for an all in-person meeting where you're not using the AV. But of course, we've got AV in here, and we want to make a hybrid experience as good as possible in here as well. So we've made some updates to this room, and I'm going to let Sam and David talk about that a little bit.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew. That's right. So as Matthew called out, so we traditional layout, we have not made any major construction updates to this room. Really, we're looking at a space like this and thinking, what would be the best optimal AV technology we can to create a great hybrid meeting experience? It really starts, again, the first thing we'll notice, we're going to put a larger display. Traditionally, maybe a couple of years ago, a room of this size would have had 49-inch display, 65-inch display is large. Now we're really trying to create as much of a large canvas as we can on the screen. So if we're to go from 0, putting in an 85-inch display in this room, I think is optimal. It's great. With a front row layout again in this room, we're really creating presence for our remote participants with front row gallery. There's plenty of room. Chat is very legible, and there's still plenty of room for shared content as well. That said, we do have a lot of rooms at this size where we have a 75-inch display, 65. That's still going to be a great experience. But if you have the opportunity, we love to go with a larger canvas. And then a room like this will also be a front of room bar is very, very much will have coverage for a size this big. And the simplicity of all-in-one, this is our Logi, the Logi Mini, the Raleigh Mini bar.
Raleigh Bar Mini.
Raleigh Bar Mini, thanks, Matthew. And again, that is a full experience. I'll let David talk through a little bit about the storage. A room like this would also be a great candidate for an Android bar, for example, and you wouldn't even need the extra storage compartment at all. And then as a bit of a teaser, we'll talk about this a little bit more after the AV, but this is also one of our pilot spaces internally at Microsoft where, again, working closely with our OEM partners, we do have the Logi site set up in this room. So when we do the flip over, we'll talk a little bit about what that experience looks like when we're introducing a second camera in the room with the almost 360 degree on the table here. So we'll jump into that in just a moment, but I'll hand it over to David to talk through a little bit about the install and considerations for the space.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam. So as you described, in this room, we went with a large 85-inch screen. Traditionally, or historically, I should say, we may have put the AV components behind the screen, pull-out mounts, and some of those components. But I mean, we run into obvious issues with the ADA, screens coming out too far. So what we've done is we've actually reduced all of that. So this is just a flat mount to the wall, and we've moved all the components, again, partnered with Heckler on a wall storage solution. And so inside this box, we have our MTR power supplies, and cabling that's needed in order to kind of power the solution. We can bring power and HDMI straight from the box. So this is all self-contained, stored on the wall. We are not running any cabling through the wall. We don't need it because what we can do is externally, we can bring power and HDMI up on the exterior part of the wall. There's a channel behind this. We've mounted the bar to the box, actually. There's a mount for that. So reducing the amount of infrastructure we have to bring to the room itself. Again, power for the bar is drawn from the box itself. Power strips. Externally, we would go, let's say, again, we had a content cam. We'd have a single cable going to that for PoE power. On the table in this particular room, we have content on control panel on there. Again, powered through a single cable and able to get content capture from the table. And then in this room, we also have the site. Using the same methodology that we have for other components, knowing that we want to add this device, we aren't asking for additional power, single cable for that device as well. So really minimizing the impact for the room itself. 3 cables, let's say, for this room out of the box to the individual peripherals, really simplifying how this room would come together.
So just to repeat back what I heard you say is the room that we came from, the medium signature, that really requires some level of investment, whether it's a new construction or even if it's a life cycle refresh. Turning that room requires hitting the reset button on that room a little bit. But what I heard you say here was 65-inch display, 75-inch display, 85-inch display. Obviously, 85 would be great if it's time to replace the screen.
Mhm.
But if you've already invested and you've got 2 years of warranty left on a 75-inch LG monitor or 65, that's okay. This will work. We're also looking at this room with a monitor. But if this were a projector room with an already perfectly good projector in there, no reason to rip that out, right? All this technology will work with a projector as well. Obviously, if you've got a lot of bright windows here, you'll want to think about the ambient light situation. But there's nothing that I heard you say about the technology in this room that has to be a certain way. What we're doing is we're moving towards a certain state, right? But that might take until your warranty is run out on your existing equipment. And so that's really important when you think about the fact that we have 6,000 rooms like this, all in various states of positioning for life cycle refresh. We're not going to go in there and bulldoze all those rooms, right? We're kind of going to sneak up on that end state. But that might be a 5-year process to get there.
We're definitely embracing a little bit more of a component refresh approach to our spaces. So you mentioned displays they could last a long time, but we're also thinking really hard about the investments we're making in this room. So a lot of our rooms will be Teams rooms. They might have an outdated or an older generation camera, for example. Well, the first consideration we'll say is, well, with the cloud and teleframe feature from Teams, we might, through a software update alone, really enhance the experience in that room without doing any hardware component updates at all. And that's through we have a lot of rooms with the Logi meetups. Those are great candidates for the IntelliFrame features.
Yeah.
And that's great. If the camera is really old and it's time for an update, but again, we've got a Teams device in the room, depending on where our MTR is located, a solution like this with, if you have a Logi bar in the front room, having an upgrade to something like the center room camera as well, that's a super easy install. We're keeping the Logi camera on the wall.
That's right.
We're just adding something that's a component that can be added pretty easily from a team. Or we're looking at something like Microsoft partnership with Yealink, where it's a all-in-one camera that's on the table as well, where you're not putting anything on the front of the room. Again, all of those considerations are things we think through when we're looking at room investments and creating the best hybrid lift.
Well, why don't we switch over again to the room tech? So we're gonna have our cameraman leave here, and we'll switch over, and you'll be able to see what this room looks like from the built-in AV.
And this is just a great moment. This is our first Hive Live session with the new gear. The Logi team spent some time in the Hive pretty recently setting this up with us. I don't think we can throw enough disclaimers. This is super early build. This is they're still fine-tuning before their GA later this summer. So 1,000 disclaimers that you're getting a sneak peek and preview into what this experience looks like.
That's right.
But so far, I think collectively, we've been really impressed by what the Logi team has been building here, and we're really excited to see this land.
One of the key differences that you'll notice in this, in the way that this device does represents the room, is that there's a picture-in-picture there, so you get a context view of the room superimposed on, in this case, the 2 most active speakers, Sam and me right now. But if David starts talking, David, I wonder if you can just you feel free to
dialogue.
Feel free to talk over me.
I think I have to talk for a little bit here,
Yeah.
so just getting it to snap on me.
The few seconds there goes David. Sam, what?
I was quiet for too long, so.
That's right. We have to treat this like a regular meeting where we're all talking over each other and constantly interrupting each other. So you get this view. What's really cool about this, and I'm not sure how they figured out how to do this, is they keep our relative position in the room. We don't have enough people here, but if we had 4 or 5 people sitting around the table, those individual gallery panels that you see would always remain in the same order as people are sitting in the room. There, it just went out to, now it sort of blew out to full panorama there for a moment. So still a couple of bugs to work out with this. This is pre-production, as Sam said, but this is a way of, without making any wholesale changes to the room, this is the way that you can use technology to help deliver a more kind of person-to-person hybrid experience in a room that's got a traditional layout that works great. That works great for in-person meetings. Typically, if you had a front-of-room device here, and you were sitting at this table with your body, with your field of view 90 degrees to the screen, you'd be turning your head like this between the person sitting opposite you or near you and the screen. There's always that little bit of, in these traditional meeting rooms, there's always that little bit of cognitive tax that you have to pay throughout the meeting to sort of process the fact that you've got 2 different sets of attendees. And that's the whole point of the signature spaces that are optimized to reduce that cognitive tax. We do that with furniture layout. We do that with room orientation, but we can also do it to some degree with technology. And adding a second camera into the room like we've done here, this is kind of an emerging way of doing that. I should say it's emerging at a low cost. We do have, we're not going to show it to you in this session, but in our boardroom and our very large spaces, we've got multiple cameras, up to 9 cameras in some of those spaces that solve that problem beautifully. But those are high spend rooms. This is a relatively affordable solution.
That's right. Yeah.
And, you know, with the modular approach that we have here, it does enable, you know, simply the additions of these type of technologies to the room without that expensive lift. We don't have to rip anything out to add this camera. You know, again, the forethought to, you know, keeping everything centrally located, easily accessible.
That's right.
Externally wired really helps us, you know, not have to be married to a table, storage solutions that are difficult to access. Even with the choice of the 85-inch in this room, the table is far enough back that you have full visibility to the different components of the screen. I know that there was a reference to Avixa also up there. So the Avixa standards do apply. We wouldn't want a screen that's too small for content, but we also are aware that the way that Teams is using the screen is probably different than when Avixa came to those size conclusions. They are specifically referencing a full utilization, single content, where we have modular components, and we want to be aware of all of those. So, you know, we want specifically content to be large enough in a room. And if we were using Avixa standards, we would have maybe too small of a screen for that to occur. So we like going, as we said in the beginning, we like going bigger than recommended in those standards.
Our rooms also have specs around acoustic performance. There's a lot of great tech that's being built into our cameras and microphones to normalize acoustics, but just the physics of a space really has an impact on the audio quality as well. In the Hive, we have a lot of different panels and treatments that we're using, from inexpensive thinner tiles. I will admit, in the Hive, sometimes we use it because our walls would otherwise look pretty beat up with different mounting holes and screw holes. But also, it's part of our approach as well when we're thinking through design. But we didn't call this out in the first room, but one of the considerations is, you know, we try to minimize the feel of you walking into a room with cameras and technology pointed at you. And when we take an approach where we're using like a dark background and we're using dark cameras and a dark AV boxes, we love the effect of the technology kind of fading away and being less of a distraction. So that's one of the elements. It also just helps put focus, especially when you have a room with a projection screen. The dark frame also helps kind of pop and focus on content and minimize some of that AV tech in the room. So it kind of helps with the acoustic treatments for the audio performance. It also just helps with overall experience of minimizing the tech overload, especially when you have multiple cameras in the room. It just really helps kind of take the emphasis off the technology. We'll start with our camera heights from the floor. So a lot of our OEM recommendations, a sweet spot for us is roughly the 40 to 42 inches for these smaller rooms.
Yep.
To try to get a good eye level with our front of room cameras. Our focus rooms, our signature rooms, all are about 40 inches. And then our displays will go immediately above that. In our larger rooms, we might be a little bit higher to just try to optimize some of those camera views. Cameras, I think, are about 42 to 46 inches in some of our larger spaces. And then displays go directly above that.
We generally avoid putting the camera on top of the display, especially in smaller rooms. As you get into the very large rooms, having the camera up high is not that big a deal. I can see we're having a little bit of a glitch with the early build. I'll say it's an early pre-release software build on the center of the table camera. There we go. You're not seeing my huge view of my forehead. We avoid putting the camera on top, and the reason is when you put the camera on top of the display as a remote audience, you are an observer of the meeting. We don't want people to be observers of a meeting. We want them to be participants in a meeting. And the way that you are a participant is by being at more or less eye level. And if you don't believe me, watch any movie with halfway decent cinematography, and you'll see the way that cameras are used to dial up your emotions. When you want to make somebody look vulnerable or minimized, the camera will be up a little bit higher. It makes them look smaller. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is a great use of that. When they're doing their journey and there's shots from above. And I know it seems a little dramatic, but we are visual people as human beings, and when you're in a meeting for 2 hours, little things like that actually matter. So we do try to keep an eye level view whenever we possibly can. We are now in a signature version of the same room. This is roughly the same size space. This is about 6 meters by 4 meters, or if you're using cheeseburger units, it's 19 feet by 13.5 feet. And so this room, we have not made any changes to the physical room itself. We originally had this as a traditional room, but you'll notice that the room does look different. And the primary difference here is in the furniture. And there is one difference I want to call out, which is in the previous room, we had an 85-inch 16 by 9 LED monitor. Here we've got a 21 by 9 proportion 105 projection. However, that's not really material to the room. You could easily swap those display technologies. The only reason that we have a projector in here is because we had a projector in here originally, and we had the wiring overhead. And that sort of underscores the point of not having to rip out existing technology in some of these more common high volume rooms. So we got projection here, we had a monitor there. It's just a nice way to have these two rooms next to each other and to compare those two technologies. And in fact, the 21 by 9 display, I'm going to let Sam and David talk about it a little bit. It does give you some advantages over 16 by 9. But the point here is we've made changes using furniture to the room. And I'm going to sit down here next to Sam. We will cut over a little bit in a little bit again to the room AV, but you can see that as I'm sitting here at this table, we call this a guitar pick table. I can still have a conversation with somebody sitting across from me or over here at this angle, but my relative angle to the camera, which is over here, is, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 degrees instead of having to turn completely like this. So bringing everybody closer to the screen, it brings us closer to front row. over here, and it kind of creates this more intimate circle. You want to say a couple more words about this?
Yeah, no, that's great, Matthew. So as we called out, we've kept all the infrastructure in the room. So our AV wall has stayed the same. We've got an all-in-one bar that we'll flip over to in a few moments. Matthew did a great job of talking through our guitar pick table. One of the other benefits you created is a little bit more of an intimate setting with our front row. So it's a great inclusive hybrid experience. It also takes up roughly half of the room size, and that's given us a lot of flexibility for the rest of the room. So we have David here who's sitting at the back. And we've had some teams who really like this stand-up table. When we flip over, you'll see David can still be a part of the meeting. He's still fully in scope of the capabilities of the camera. Microphone pickup, speakers are still great. This works well, especially on more informal team meetings, right? So it's great when there is your full meeting happening in the space. David can be a part of the conversation, but he's also, you don't have your laptop with you now.
I don't, yeah.
But you know, if you had some emails to catch up on, maybe you just had a portion of the meeting that you wanted to jump in on and you kind of wanted to sneak out when you were done. This is a great collaboration space as well in the back, whether you're coming in for your team stand-up in the morning, whether it's on the whiteboard or you have a visual whiteboard like a hub in your room or one of our other boards. This works really well. A lot of teams have really appreciated the flexibility that this provides the space. We had one team who came in, they said, we like the table, but we actually have a bunch of beanbag chairs and a putting green that we want to kind of keep in the back. So they were super informal and that works really well for them. Our small signature room, both from hybrid collaborative teams, that has worked really well for them. We also have a lot of our executives who really appreciate this layout as well. They have their team meetings at the front. Then also if they're having a one-on-one session, they've got extra stools on this side as well. So you can also have a more informal coffee chat with someone here without, if you don't need the full AV solution. So there's a lot of flexibility and this layout has resonated really well. The last comment I'll make before handing off to David, if there's any extra comments, is again, because it is the same technology stack as the room next door, it gives you some flexibility in furniture. So you have a traditional table. If this layout works better, you can do a day 2 update with different furniture. If you're switching around and you want to go back, that's also not a problem. Where you're going to store your tables in the meantime is something you'll have to figure out. But again, you don't have to do everything all at once, which is also appreciated. David, we kind of covered a lot and we're running short of time, but was there anything that I missed that you wanted to?
No, you did a very thorough job. I will say, sitting even back here, with the screen, the size, I mean, everything feels comfortable. And as you said, I mean, it's kind of an informal space. If you're sitting at the table, you may feel obligated to be more engaged at a meeting, maybe that you aren't the primary attendee, where this space does allow you to, do more ad hoc work, come in and out, or even longer meetings, all day meetings. If you are only there for,
I love those.
Yeah, but you don't need to be the all day attendee. You can come in and out and not feel like you're impacting the flow of the meeting as much.
Do you want to sit here for another moment?
Yeah.
And we'll maybe
Let's cut over.
We'll cut over.
Yeah.
So we'll say thanks to the cameraman, our crew today. And I'll take a seat here at the front.
So again, we've got 3 people spread all throughout the room. I'm sitting opposite Sam at this point, at the front here in the guitar pick table. And David is sitting in the rear of the room. And David, you could just say a couple of words.
Yeah, they probably caught my audio before, but yeah.
We've had this room audio, even with the extra camera, it's always been, the microphone's been picked up from the P50.
Well, I just want to say thanks to everybody for attending. And I'm looking forward to the next one.